Hello everyone, thank you for your responses to my first video. For those of you who haven't watched it, please do. It's on the pandemic of mental depression which is about to sweep the world even if a cure to coronavirus is found. The link to the video is in the description box below. If you're new to the channel, welcome. This is the Age of Pandemic series and I discuss the social and psychological upheavals that will overwhelm the world after 2020. I've mentioned what the series is all about in the first video, but since some of you have suggested a detailed video on the premise, I will make one. So stay tuned, do subscribe to my channel and please hit the bell icon so you don't miss a video. In this episode, I'd like to talk about the impact of the present pandemic, that is COVID-19, on women all over the world. But before I begin, please look at this photograph carefully. I found this on the website of Rolling Stone magazine. This image represents a man and a woman in an intimate moment. It suggests that in an age of obsessive fear of catching the COVID-19 virus, the mask will be ubiquitous. But think again, why is it that only the woman is wearing the mask? Look closer. The mask on the woman is on the brink of moving away to expose her nostril. She is milliseconds away from turning COVID positive. This is a new challenge for the feminist movement and it is centered around an ethical question. Why does it always have to be the woman to take these steps to prevent the spread of diseases, to bear the burden of contraception, and to practice safe sex? The pill was discovered in 1961. Gender justice advocates have pointed out that since then, men have been inclined to impose upon us women the burden of practicing Planned Parenthood. This is a universal experience. It was as if at some secret world summit, men resolved that condoms were no fun. And so, if women wanted sex without the fear of babies, they had to take the pill, notwithstanding the possible side effects. Then, in the HIV/AIDS era, condoms were deemed to be the only vehicles of safe sex. Even then, because men tended to behave irresponsibly, female condoms were developed. But these were less effective than male condoms, and that's why AIDS continues to rage. So, if face masks become the new condoms, a question arises. Will millennials and Gen Z women, like their mothers with condoms and grandmothers with the pill, be forced to oblige their men with one-way safety? This is just a small example of the old definitions of what is right, what is feminine, what is the limit to a woman's freedom. At what point must a girl concede to her man's male privilege? These questions could return in the world after COVID-19. Now for some breaking news. Until January this year, which seems so long ago now, we millennial women born in the aftermath of the Cold War and with so much power over our lives had reason to believe that the 21st century was ours. The signs were good, quite good actually. Of course, an equal world was miles away. But when Saudi women got the right to drive, it was like man on the moon. Women in highly patriarchal India were getting parity with men in the army. And then the coronavirus pandemic broke. It wasn't long before women began to feel the whiplash. A horrifying surge of domestic violence with women at the receiving end began to be reported from all corners of the world. And now, feminists will realize that the world after COVID-19 has thrown up unforeseen, unprecedented, and perhaps unresolvable challenges. A new age of campaigning for women's rights may be in the offing. Why? Because women of the 2020s cannot be expected to surrender meekly to injustices. We owe this entitlement of ours to the sacrifices of the women who burnt their bras in Atlantic City in 1968. This was done in symbolic defiance of the norms of feminine role play imposed by the patriarchy.
They set up a freedom trash can. And in this trash can, women were supposed to throw all their instruments of, quote, beauty oppression.
These instruments included girdles, bras, fake eyelashes, and high heels. Other women threw in Cosmopolitan and Playboy magazines, along with anything that these protesters felt oppressed women.
Of course, the feminist movement is divided right down the middle over the implications of bra burning. Many, like me, think misogyny should not be replaced by misandry. The culture of downgrading women should not be replaced by a new normal of women humiliating men. However, we were on the right track. A lot was achieved. For one thing, women who have had access to education are better educated now than their brothers after just a generation. In developed countries like America, Britain, France, and Germany, women of the pre-coronavirus era had the same chances as men of rising to the top of their chosen professions, as this video shows.
Women are as ambitious as men. They earn the majority of university degrees. In America, they now ask for promotions as often as men. But it's the price women pay for motherhood that holds them back. In Britain, 70% of mothers reduce their working hours or switch to a less demanding job, compared with 11% of fathers. In Australia, it's 56% of mothers and 19% of fathers. While in France, 55% of mothers scale back, compared with 13% of fathers. When an American woman goes back to work, her salary is on average lower than it would have been if she hadn't had a child.
This was largely true of developing countries like India, where women in the workplace were fast rising to the top. But as the Economist video went on to show, there was a roadblock to advancement waiting to happen.
The race for gender equality is far from over. As more children choose non-traditional careers and men do more childcare, fewer working women will be held back.
Yes, men were changing in that world. There were signs of change of attitude among men. Men recognized that both parents could share the burden of raising a family and saw the plain truth that giving time for fatherhood over career was well worth the sacrifice. But things could change in the world after COVID-19. Economies are expected to lose anywhere between 25 and 50% of their bases. So in every sector of the economy, from food to engineering, fashion to law, jobs will be lost. In the world after COVID-19, men can be expected to hold on to their positions in power and leverage them to an extent where they get their old monopolies back. That is what I fear. How do I know? Because I've read history. During World War II, with the men doing the fighting, the governments of the belligerent Western powers had no option but to throw open factories to women.
With men away fighting, there aren't enough workers to make military supplies like airplanes, warships, and weapons. So the government turns to woman power. At first, many male factory owners don't want to hire women workers. They claim women aren't fit for difficult, dirty, and dangerous factory jobs. But without women, the Allies will lose the war. So the government launches a campaign to change people's minds. And it works. By 1945, more than 6 million women have war jobs.
During the war years, women in America, Britain, Germany, and Australia began to dream of a new era where they would work alongside men and win respect in society as equals. But after the war was over, the men returned and quickly took their jobs back from the women. The dreams women had begun to have of equality in society were smashed forever.
The returning soldiers expect their old jobs back. 3/4 of women workers don't want to give them up. Many are fired when they refuse to quit. Within a year, more than 3 million women have left the workforce.
Something similar may happen in the 2020s if the feminist movement fails to intervene. Men may return to guarding their turf, using a variety of tricks which I can't even begin to imagine. And women will be deprived of jobs if they have them, or denied them if they don't. But we don't even have to imagine where the first attack will come from. Remember the Economist video which talked about the motherhood penalty? I had also rhapsodized a bit about men, well, some men, turning a new leaf to realize that fatherhood was as important as careers. That was in the pre-COVID-19 era. Now, in the world after COVID-19, men may well behave just like the homecoming warriors in World War II. The past couple of decades have seen huge strides in women's struggle to win maternity benefits at the workplace. Now, most countries give maternity benefits so that women can keep their jobs as well as enjoy motherhood.
Out of the 196 countries worldwide, there are 7 countries who don't have laws requiring paid maternity leave. Suriname, Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Papua New Guinea, Tonga, the United States of America, Palau. Wait, what? Oh, that's right.
The threat perception, if you like, comes from pre-existing situations of deregulation. You see, when the global recession broke out in 2008 as a result of the financial crisis in America, there were large-scale layoffs all over the world. So women, wherever they had jobs, were told through sign language that if they wanted maternity benefits, they could forget about moving up the ladder when they returned. What I mean to say is, between 2008 and the mid-2010s, it was extremely risky for women to get in the family way. If that couldn't be avoided, it was risky also to avail full maternity benefits because women could end up being laid off on other pretexts or denied promotions. In fact, in many situations, women began returning to work almost immediately after delivering their babies for fear of provoking backlash. From the point of view of the companies, male-dominated, almost all of them, it was also extremely costly to keep a position unfilled for 4 months, 5 months, up to 11 months in some countries. The point is, governments can be lauded for introducing maternity benefits, but they left quite a few loopholes in such regulation for the private sector. And remember, the private sector is the biggest employer anywhere in the world. I fear that in the world after COVID-19, things could get even worse than the 2008 recession because economists are predicting a return to conditions last seen in the 1930s when the Great Depression happened. The loopholes in the regulation on women's rights is something we are going to suffer from. You see, while there are laws favoring women, from maternity benefits to protection from sexual harassment, these laws can, in many cases, be reduced easily to gentlemen's agreements. We women, I mean the leaders of the feminist movement, rush to have their celebration parties without caring to read the fine print. Let's consider, for example, sexual harassment. Now, in every country wedded to Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence, the onus of proof is on the complainant. The proof is expensive, both in terms of lawyers' fees and the reputation of the woman complainant in society. In the Harvey Weinstein case, for example, that sexual predator got away for years because his money and influence secured him immunity from his victims. Ultimately, he was exposed, arrested, and successfully prosecuted because he was plain stupid. Yes, Harvey Weinstein, after years of silencing his victims with non-disclosure agreements, hush money payment, and even brutal intimidation, got complacent. In his arrogance, he overlooked that there were still some victims whom he had not covered quite well.
Harvey Weinstein is heading to prison. Judge James Burke in New York City just delivered the sentence, 23 years. Weinstein was eligible for anywhere between 5 and 29 years in prison. The former movie producer was convicted last month on a first-degree criminal sexual act and third-degree rape.
But countless other sexual predators and serial molesters around the world got away even at the height of the Me Too movement because society in general was yet to embrace the idea of placing trust in a woman's statement. As 2019 rolled into 2020, we were still debating whether a woman who did not speak up at the time of the incident but did so after 5 or 20 years needs to be heard. We also debated whether a woman making a sexual harassment claim was actually using her complaint as a prop for a larger agenda. In a world after COVID-19, we are likely to see women discard whatever strength they may have derived from the Me Too movement. Why? because under conditions of economic instability and imminent loss of jobs, women are likely to give up the Me Too movement's most significant gain. What was that gain? Me Too's shrillness. Something that can be described as microfeminism was growing at the grassroots level. Predatory men were becoming more careful. But I fear that the world after COVID-19 will give birth to renewed aggression. If vulnerable women try to resist the moves of these kind of men, they can be threatened with layoffs or even sacked on flimsy grounds. And by vulnerable, I mean anybody with a mouth to feed from any strata of society. And it is not only the working women who will suffer this humiliation. Even before 2020 began, we saw large numbers of women entering the workforce with the burden of student loans. Their parents had taken out these loans with the optimism that once they had their degrees, it was only a matter of time before secure, well-paying jobs came their way, and with that they could easily repay their loans. But as it happened, for most millennials, student loans were like nightmares. Salaries were no longer out of rosy dreams, but rooted in declining economic growth and piling inventories. Many young entrants realized that they could end up never owning a house or setting up a family for many years. In the world after COVID-19, young women from middle class or lower middle class or working class backgrounds stand on the brink of a moral precipice. No, I am not exaggerating. Many of you will recall what happened in Russia and the former East Bloc countries of Europe after communism fell. There was a devastating economic collapse, and none of the new governments of these newly independent or newly created countries could control it. The vacuum was filled by a newly moneyed elite, the oligarchs. They developed a powerful global operation in the trafficking of women from these countries. You've heard of the Bolshoi Theatre in Moscow. It was founded under Catherine the Great in 1776. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the Bolshoi Theatre was no longer financed by the state, and its dancers, musicians, and other employees were left starving. In the next video from 2013, the famous ballerina Anastasia Voloshkova says that the oligarchs of the new Russia had converted the Bolshoi Theatre into a brothel.
Now, Voloshkova is talking about the private lives of some ballerinas. She says Bolshoi management pressured its female dancers to sleep with wealthy donors, something the Bolshoi is flatly denying.
Clear. I was fired from the Bolshoi in 2003, not because I was tall and heavy, but because the director of the theater, Iksanov, he was asked and pushed to fire me, and he did it in a very unlegal way. So I opened a very big CU process against him, and I won this process, and I proved that he was not right. Actually, now everything was going on at the Bolshoi Theatre. Unfortunately, this is not art process. This is outrage, corruption, and what can we see now? It's also criminal and criminalism. And I have to tell you that even those days when I opened this due process, I was threatened by somebody who came to me to my dressing room with a knife, unfortunately, and they asked me to, from the name of director and all administrators, they asked me to stop this due process. So all these criminal stories, they started those days, 10 years ago. What we have now, and all over the world can see that this is really terrible.
A lot of people these days are describing life under lockdown as a war against coronavirus. Personally, I am against the war metaphor. There is nothing glorious about war, especially if you are a woman. Women are the worst victims of war. We lose our fathers, brothers, husbands, uncles, cousins, sons, so many loved ones. We lose our homes, our futures. We are left raped, battered, and devastated for life.
We're at war. In a true sense, we're at war, and we're fighting an invisible enemy.
Let us not make the mistake of masculinizing this struggle against COVID-19. We are equal partners in this struggle against the virus. If feminist thinkers do not evolve strategies and theories right now, then in the world after COVID-19, half the population will be pushed back into subordination, subjugation, and civility. In my next video, I will speak about inequality as one of the aspects of the post-COVID-19 world. I will highlight this issue so that the positive energies of governments and civil societies are directed towards helping humanity cope better with the fallout of the tragedy that is upon us. Thank you for watching. I'll be back next week Meanwhile, please follow Age of Pandemic on Twitter and Instagram for daily updates.